Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and let's talk about Ole Miss's dynamic duo on offense today. Right, they bring back Trinidad Chambliss at quarterback and Kewan Lacy at running back for all of the roster attrition that came with Lane Kiffin going to LSU and a bunch of the staffers following him to Baton Rouge. All in all, the roster really stayed intact. Right, like at least in the ways that you'd generally be worried about, losing your quarterback, your star running back, things like that. They lost some receivers, lost some pieces on both lines and on defense. But in terms of the superstars, right? I mean, Chambliss and Lacy, holding on to them is a massive win for Pete Golding and the Rebels. And you're just looking ahead to this year for Ole Miss. Can both of those guys replicate what they did last season? For Chambliss, right, you're coming up from Ferris State. He was supposed to be behind Austin Simmons. He wasn't even supposed to be the starter last year. But when Simmons got banged up, Chambliss came in and just, we all know what happened. Right? He was a newcomer of the year in the SEC. He was all SEC second team. He was just impossible to completely stop because no matter how well you covered a play, no matter how many routes you defended, even if you had a good spy on him who could keep up, he would just improvise. And it would just work, right? You remember that play back in the Sugar Bowl where he runs laps and laps. He's 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and then it's a first down pass to Kewan Lacy, right? The arm talent is there. It's not like he's wild or erratic or makes a bunch of bad decisions. He's smart. He's always composed. He's an incredible athlete. You can't really just point to Trinidad Chambliss and identify a true weakness in his game. But I do have a couple of questions with all that said heading into this season about Chambliss. So the term sophomore slump exists for a reason, right? You see, guys break onto the scene in their freshman seasons in college or rookie seasons in the NFL. It's great. And in the second year, they take a bit of a step back. And it's not necessarily because they're any worse of a player or because they regressed at all, but it's, you allowed everyone else in that league who's also very good at their jobs to adjust to you. Now, Trinidad Chambliss is not a sophomore, and I'm well aware of that, right? He had to sue to get another year of eligibility this season. So he's a very veteran guy. But this is his second year in D1, right? It's his second year in the SEC. So that means that 15 other SEC defensive coordinators, although granted they obviously all don't play him, but they have an extra year now to adjust to him, right? You're able to look at when Chambliss was succeeding, when he was unstoppable, and then sometimes where he did get stopped, right? Or maybe he did throw a pick, or maybe he did take a sack. You're able to take all of that information, have an entire offseason, as opposed to just 7 days before you play them, to prep for him, right? You know what he's comfortable with, what he's uncomfortable with. And another reason why that worries me is because now Lane Kiffin is gone and Charlie Weiss is gone. Those two guys, as a collective, are just offensive. It's brilliant. It's just pure brilliance when it comes to devising an offense. And obviously the talent was great for Ole Miss last year, but it wouldn't have been the same without those two guys. So Ole Miss fans can say what they want about Lane and Charlie Weiss. Obviously they left in not a great way. They were incredible at their jobs. And they were massive reasons why Ole Miss was as good as they were last year. So now you have Pete Golding as the head man, who obviously I trust as at least a player's coach. I know how much the players respect him. And you have John David Baker there as the offensive coordinator. Both of those guys could be better than Lane and Charlie Weiss, but for right now, I have questions about how that short transfer of power translates and how the offense as a whole looks with those two guys as the head coach and OC, as opposed to it being Lane and Charlie Weiss. So not only do I have questions about, how does the offense actually run, but when things are bad, are the adjustments going to be as sharp? Are they able to coach Chambliss up in the game as well as Lane and Charlie Weiss were? Because that is still incredibly important no matter how seasoned and how experienced a player is. So I do have some questions about, is Chambliss going to be as effective as he was last year? I don't really have those with Kewan Lacy. And part of the reason I have listeners about Kewan is because, it might sound backwards, but because of the depth behind him. Last year, Lacy carried the ball over 300 times. And it was really good. Right? He was very, very good the entire season. But then he got beat up against Tulane in the playoff. He had a hamstring injury against Miami in the playoff. All of those carries caught up to him. And that's not a Kewan Lacy defect. I'm not saying that in the sense of he is injury prone, we can't trust him for 12 games. Any human being who carries the ball 300 times is going to have injury problems stack up. So I don't think that is sustainable for Kewan. But the good news for him and Ole Miss this year is that they're bringing Mekhi Frazier from Michigan State and Joshua Dye from Southern Utah. Mekhi Frazier, he only ran for 500 yards and 2 scores last year, but he was a pretty highly rated guy. And then Joshua Dye from Southern Utah, not many people know who he is. He ran for over 1,800 yards and 28 scores last year. So he is an explosive, just dynamo in the backfield. Having those two guys plus Shakai Mills and JT Lindsey, who are also back in that room, it's going to take 40 or 50 carries off of Kewan Lacy maybe throughout the entire season. And you could look at that and say, oh, well, I guess we'll have less yards, less touchdowns. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Because then, sure, you'll have a couple less carries by volume for Kewan, but the quality of those carries is going to go up. The burst he has, the toughness he has, the strength he has to put his shoulder into a linebacker in week 11 is going to be higher than it was last season. Because I think he'll be a little bit fresher, right? He won't have as many hits on him. So Kewan, I think, can really even elevate his game more than it already was last season. And it's because of the guys behind him who can help take carries off his plate. And even though that does kind of sound counterintuitive for running backs, I believe that being able to, to delegate a drive or two in the second or third quarter is just that crucial to your longevity, your sustainability, and it really doesn't do that much of a hit to your numbers as you might think it does, on paper. So I was looking forward to what Trinidad and Kewan can both do. At their ceiling, if both Chambliss and Lacy just improve off last season and play even better, they might both be at the Heisman ceremony. I don't know off the top of my head if we've ever had a quarterback running back duo on the same team be at the same Heisman ceremony, but that is possible. It is possible because of how explosive Chambliss can be through the air and with his legs, as a dual threat. And Kewan, if he just puts together, like a 20 touchdown, 1,300 yard season, he will probably be in New York as well. So at their ceilings, both of these guys can be the best at their position in the country. And their floor is pretty high too, right? I don't mean that to say that their floor is much worse, but, if they do kind of bottom out a little bit, I think that for Kewan, it just might be, all those carries from last year, they can still carry over and add up. Maybe the depth behind him isn't as strong, so there's still all that pressure on him. And is it also a consequence of maybe the passing game not being as consistently threatening and electric? So teams can really commit to the run just a little bit stronger because, you don't have Weiss and Lane there drawing up passing plays, right? Because if you're in the receiver room, you need Daryl Gill, you need Jonte Cook to pan out. If they don't, it's possible this passing offense can maybe not even be bad, just maybe a little bit behind what it was last season. That will allow defenses to crowd the boxes, have a little more bodies in their 4-Key-1. So even as a floor for Ole Miss, I don't think their team loses very many games, and the offense will be one of the better ones in the SEC, but that peak is really what we're looking for. Right, that peak of both of these guys being the best at their position, both being first-round picks in the NFL draft next year, that potential is there, and that's why Ole Miss fans are so excited about these two players this fall.